Hey there, welcome. We're here this evening with one of my favorite people in this world. I say that because I worked with him for a few years there, Mr. Paul James. Hey, Paul, welcome.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you so much for having me today, and very excited about being here.
Ah, great.
Pleasure.
And Paul, for our audience, can you just let them know what you taught and what grade level and just your work in education?
Yeah, sure. It all started for me as a teacher at St. Anthony's of Padua in Gardena.
Oh,
And I was actually what they call a contract teacher working for a program called SHAPE, which is an organization that promotes health and physical fitness. And so they hired me and they placed us in different Catholic schools. And so I was placed at St. Anthony's in Padua in Gardena. And so I taught physical education for grades first through eighth there, even though they had kindergarten, but only first through the eighth graders came out there. So that was how I got my feet wet in the teaching profession. And so then, of course, I was interviewing because my credential was in multiple subjects. So I got a call from LA Unified and landed a job at LA Unified. And that was my first job was at Dolores Street School, which was in Carson. And I started as a fifth grade teacher and then a year of fourth grade. And then I went right into sixth grade and taught sixth grade for about 7 years there. Then from there, I went to a Harbor Math Magnet Park Western, which is in San Pedro. And I went out of the classroom for a year, was what we called the math science coordinator. And then finally, I got what I call kind of my dream, my home. And I went to ELC, Elizabeth Learning Center, and where I met you, Jacob, as well. And I spent 15 years there teaching mainly science, seventh and eighth grade. Did a little PE. I went out of the classroom for years, middle school coordinator when we first started. And when I first went to ELC, it was just they were just coming from that K through 6 environment, and they were expanding to seventh grade. That's when it started to go that K through 12 concept.
nice.
It started seventh grade, yeah. And then after the 15 years, that's when I stepped away and tried that administrative role when I left. So yeah, so that's kind of my journey and my experiences. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. As you're sharing, Paul, I mean, I didn't know all that experience you had in the elementary level. And then you taught in the middle. And, my wife and I, and I'm not lying to you here, every so often we talk about, back in the day when we started, and she started at the LC too a little bit for subbing, and she subbed a lot of classrooms, and she always talks about your class. She goes, that was the best class I ever subbed. And I go, well, it's fun. I told her, yeah, I covered Paul a couple of times, and I said, I agree with I see what you're saying. And I thought maybe you could share with it, because, we thought this would be a good time to talk a little bit about classroom management, because that's a big piece of teaching, especially for teaching middle school. And I know a lot of our viewers are starting to teach. We try to gear this a lot of times for new teachers. Teaching middle school is tough. I remember my 4 years at ELC, teaching middle school, those are tough years.
Yeah.
And what did you do? What were some of your strategies to kind of, of course you left the elementary school level, but to get to the middle school, how did that work? And what were some of the things that you did to have a tight ship like you had?
Yeah. So, I think just that you touched on teaching elementary school, and I think the elementary piece really helped me teach be successful. Well, whatever success is to everybody, but to have good classroom management, I think teaching elementary school really parlayed me into understanding what my middle schoolers needed. And not that these are strategies that I'm going to give you, and maybe they are, but I think for me, what really worked for me, Ruben and Jacob, was kind of, setting really clear expectations with my kids. And I mean, really, really clear, and letting them know what those expectations were. And then the second piece of it was being very consistent once I set those expectations. And then, and it wasn't just like when you set those expectations, it was, kind of a planned concept. I guess the strategy part was, visualizing exactly what I wanted in the classroom, how I wanted that classroom to be, and then being able to give detailed explanations to my kids and explaining the expectations. And then the important piece was modeling and demonstrating those expectations, and when I say that, it's a simple thing like sharpening a pencil, or how we stand in the classroom, or how we talk in the classroom. And then, once I modeled and demonstrated that, it was then practicing it together. For instance, Ruben, Jacob, you'd be my partners sitting next to me, and I'd say, I want this type of voice in the class, a whisper voice. So I would say to each, your neighbor, as we all would, tell your neighbor your name. And of course, I'd practice first, and I'd ask everybody else, do you hear what I say or said? They would say, no. That's what I meant by whisper voice. We can communicate, but you really can't hear. So here,
classroom voice, yeah.
Yeah, classroom voice. Or, if I wanted a chorus voice or a unison voice, this is what it would sound like. Or if it was supposed to be a higher level voice, this is what it would sound like. Things like that. But I mean, walking patterns, dismissal patterns, how we did homework check, transitions were huge. How to make a change from, one subject to another, or how to leave the room and things like that. Entering the class, just restroom breaks. One person wants to go to the restroom. Everybody wants to go to the restroom, right? How we tuck shirts in because we had a
dress code.
We had dress code back then, right? So, our dress code was kind of lax. So I tried to tighten it up for my room a little bit. And that was always a big thing, tucking shirts in. So just little things like that, being consistent. And the kids always wanted to know, well, what's in it for me? So I was always talking about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So, you're doing it for yourself, not for getting something. So we really talked about that intrinsic and extrinsic motivation piece. And, they always want to know, what am I going to get out of this? And I said, well, you get pride. Well, and he said, well, that's okay. I said, well, you get more pride. Then you get abundance of pride, and you get self-esteem, you get self-worth, all those things. And then we go into opportunities about, schools and opportunity, and it pays dividend. And right now your dividends are learning, whether it's a word a day or something. It's that's how you're getting rewarded. Or yes, they'd always throw, I'm getting paid, but this is how you're starting your profession as well. So just little things like that help me connect with the
Mr.
kids.
James, I like what you say when you said modeling what exactly you want, because this is a really good strategy. Also, considering the fact that there are some students who are not listening for whatever reason, for whatever reason. Now, they might have learning disability, or they might be, middle school, they're interested in the opposite sex. So when you model it, they see it, they could register that. And I also really like what you said about visualizing it first, because a lot of times we don't do that. We don't know what we want, but it's good to sit down and picture it. Okay, this is what I want to see. How do I get there? I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
I do want to point out, I want to tell you a really quick story. And I don't even know if it's true, but I'm going to throw it out there. I can't remember who told me this. I'm thinking it was a student. It might have been a staff member. But they said, well, a couple of kids said Mr. James was mean. And that really already tipped me off that you were a good teacher. I also listened to the source who said it, and I was like, oh, okay. And then the other thing was, some kid told me that you kept the students lined up outside for a long time until they got it right.
Yeah.
And even if it's not true, like it might have been 10 or 15 minutes, they said something like that, like you kept them outside. I don't know if that's true or not, but I will say this before you tell me the truth behind that. I walked away from that story really getting a lot out of that, because I realized, oh, this is the value. There is real value in procedures and getting the routines down, because if they're not down, especially with middle schoolers, it's not going to be conducive environment for learning. So is it true, first of all?
Yeah, Ruben, that's a great point. I would love to know the students you talk to, because that makes me feel good. They remember that. So, Ruben, I was a stickler to routine and expectations and following through. And, I had my kids, their job was, they knew as soon as my door opened, class started. So that means they should be in 2 lines, ready to go, eyes forward, no talking. As soon as that door opened, lines were straight. Whether you call it militaristic style or whatever, that's what I expected. So it was once again, Ruben, exactly what you said. You know, I had a visualization what it should look like, and I modeled and demonstrated what it should look like, and we practiced it. And if they couldn't practice it, we'd walk in the classroom, and you know, it wasn't to my expectations. We'd walk back out again, and we would do it again, and we would stand there until we got it. Okay, that's what it means. That's what class means. The bell has rang, the door's open, we are ready to go, and class has started. And so we would practice that, you know, and that's what I meant by those minute details. You know, everybody's not the same, and I'm not saying that's going to work for everybody, but that was just my style of teaching, and that worked for me. Not that it works for everybody else.
I think it does work though for at least the middle school. I mean, even high school. But I say that because I remember covering your class, Paul, and I remember the kids lining up, and I felt like I didn't have to say anything. They just knew exactly what to do. They walked in. But you know what? It was nice to have order. As you know, if anybody's ever subbed, they know that when they see a sub, they go, "Oh, it's going to be chaos." It wasn't like that for you. When they walked in, there's another thing that you had on the board is you'd have an agenda. Mm-hmm. You had every detail what they were to do. And for a sub, that's great. I mean, you could share, oh, this is what your teacher wanted. But right away, they looked up at the wall. I remember them looking at the wall, at the board, and they saw your agenda, what to do first, second, third, and they started going at it. you know? Yeah. And I'm like, what the heck? This is not high school. These are middle school kids. And I think that's something, can you speak to that? Like an agenda for a class? I mean.
Yeah. And Jacob, you guys are so good. I mean, yeah, you're so right, Jacob. I mean, I remember it so vividly because, you know, the teaching part was so important to me, and that was a big thing. Anyway, but back to your question. Yeah, so on the board, I would have the warm-up activity. You know, basically what it was is and I explained to my kids, these are the things, as soon as you walk in, this is what you're supposed to do. You're not going to hear from me. I'm not going to talk. You're not going to talk. You're going to read what it needs to be done, and you're going to go at these things. If you have a question, you know, you're going to have to hold your question. You know, there were no hand raising or anything during that time, unless there was a dire emergency. They knew there was always an out, but and there was a dire emergency that no hands should be up and there should be no talking. That gave me my time to take roll, you know, make sure everybody's here in the right place, to get their homework checked and all that real quick. But yeah, it would be an agenda, basically, you know, warm up, today's activities, the objective for the day, the goals of the day, and then of course independent work that would be happening, and of course, you know, any homework end of the day activities, all be up there for them, so they knew exactly. A lot of times they'd be writing their homework down for the day too, in that whole thing, besides doing their warm up activities. So it was already done, and then I would explain it later. So yeah, that was all on the board so they could see it and understand, and I'd explain it later.
Oh yeah, it was definitely had an influence on me and my thinking in the future regarding how to have those first few minutes. And I do thank you, and I don't think I've ever thanked you in person, even though we're on video here, but it's pretty close enough. But I do thank you. But I was thinking too, Paul. I mean, regarding like, was there somebody who mentored you on all that? I mean, did you learn that from somebody, or is this just kind of trial and error? Was there somebody who just guided you during your career?
Yeah, you know, there was, I think there's something about a book that I'll share a little later, but, you know, I had some good people when I was at Dolores Street School, my elementary school. You know, Elliot Sutton was a gentleman that was like a 5th grade, 6th grade teacher at the time. There was Nancy Willie, Marilyn Berner, and Cecilia Elmore. They were all, you know, stellar teachers that I would pick their brains, you know, observe them, ask questions. And you develop, you know, kind of what works for them, what maybe didn't mesh with your personality. So I was able to, you know, use them as kind of my springboard. And then, of course, you know, reading some books as well. And then kind of coming up with my plan, like Ruben said, that visualization piece of what I really wanted in my classroom. But those 4 people certainly helped to give me that opportunity to ask questions, to observe, to understand, you know, what a well-run classroom would look like. Not that, you know, mine was exactly like theirs like mine, because mine, like I said, it took it, you know, maybe to a level where some people don't want to be at that level of discipline or management and things like that either, because it does take a little bit of planning and work to get to that point. Yeah.
For sure.
I do like the fact that you use the word dream job and middle school in the same sentence or thereabouts, because a lot of people hear the word middle school and they freak out. But I think you've laid out the groundwork here of what success in that grade is, because it can be intimidating. But
Yeah.
if you bring these tools, these strategies into the class, there's less intimidation. And talk about respect. It's really about respect, really, because one day you're a teacher, you're gonna miss a day.
Yeah.
Somebody's gonna come in from you. And I remember covering for you as well, and covering for Miss Ponce. Remember Ponce?
Yeah.
Does anybody remember her?
I do.
And I couldn't believe it, how quiet the class was and respectful, and they just went about their work, and it's inspirational, because I taught middle school there
For
too,
sure.
and I wanted the same thing.
Now, can you tell us though about those books? I mean, because we love here at Pod and Deliver to talk about books. Can you tell us a book or two that kind of definitely had an effect on you?
Yeah. So I brought the book. I pulled it out. So
cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to kind of show it to you if you can see it. This book, it's called Classroom Management for Elementary Teachers.
Oh, nice.
And I even looked it up a few weeks ago just to make sure it's still being published, and it is. I think it's by Carolyn Everstein. There's like Everston and Edmund Emmer. There's about 5 authors on here. I don't know if they're still there.
Okay.
But I first got this in 1984. So it was one of my classes I was taking. I think we had a classroom management class that we had to take for our methods classes.
Yeah.
So this book for me was incredible, and I think this was kind of helped me develop my plan, as we talked about earlier, for my visualization and how to go about what I want to do, because it breaks things down to the minute detail. Everything I was talking about, just every little thing that can happen or go wrong in a classroom, it basically is there for you. It's a very detailed approach in a variety of different areas. For instance, I think it's, how to organize a classroom, your floor plan, your spacing, your traffic patterns. There's checklists, there's activities, there's case studies in there. It talks about rules and procedures, managing how to manage student work. I mean, one of the biggest things was, okay, so if you assign something for the day in class, well, what happens if those Highflyers are done in 10 minutes and there's still 40 minutes left in the period? What do you do with those kids? And so, it's kind of like that's that managing piece. Rewards and consequences, getting off to a good start every day, maintaining good student behavior, grouping, all those types of things. But everything was very detailed. Every little thing seemed to be in this book.
Oh, wow.
Depending on how detailed you wanted to be.
Mr. James,
yeah.
Going off what you just said, because this topic actually came up recently on our podcast, we covered a book called Charting the Course to Standards-Based Grading. And my answer to you, now I'm not sure if it's your answer, but you mentioned those Highflyers who are done with, there's 40 minutes left of class. My first response to that is maybe those particular students need something more. They need some type of individual attention, and they need something a little bit different. And it might be time to reassess so that would be my first thought. What would you say to that?
Yeah. So, you're going to differentiate your classroom. So absolutely what you're talking about, Ruben, is, you're going to have some extra activities in your classroom for each different level of kids. And once you get to know your kids, basically who those kids are, those kids that may need some remediation or differentiation on one side on a certain end, and those kids, those Highflyers on another end, where you have some types of activities for those kids to do as well. So, and that's what I meant in this book. It does a great job of, giving you those ideas of what you can do with those kids, on either end of the spectrum, even in the middle, for something to do. And not just busy work. We don't want busy work for kids. Mm-hmm. There's too much busy work for adults sometimes. Yeah. Meetings sometimes, that we get caught up in, right? So, Yeah. So, it has to be productive and work that's going to help and support the kids and something they feel, oh yeah, I'm getting something out of this, and maybe something enjoyable and engaging as well. Something that's more thought provoking and
Right.
critical thinking. Yeah. Something they can create. And that's what I always found kids love to do.
Paul, kind of steering to a little different direction here regarding your time in the classroom. There was a time where you decided to leave the classroom. Now, there were a couple times in your career where you left for not left, but you did something a little different outside the classroom. But you made a big step right there towards the end of Elizabeth Learning Center, going on to being an administrator. I could tell that you were not really at that moment. You were like, wow, this is a big step. Can you just share regarding, there might be people watching who are considering leaving the teaching profession, not teaching profession, but leaving teaching and going to administration or maybe a out of classroom position. What are some of the things that helped you kind of step forward in faith there, and how do you feel about that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that positives and the concerns, right? That you're talking about. So, I mean, and Jacob, you were so right. Once again, you're right on it. When I was making that decision, that was a really, really tough decision. I mean, huge. I mean, because I really enjoyed what I was doing. I mean, we all have our days where, you don't have your A+ day and things like that or whatever. But, that student contact was really critical and important in my life. And I really enjoyed students. So this was a huge decision for me because I knew things were going to change. So I think the first thing I would ask myself for those people that are thinking about going out of the classroom is you got to really ask yourself, why do you want to make this move? And list all those positives and negatives, just like we all do all the time for decisions. But, on the concerning side for me was, it's a new school. In my case, I was leaving the district. So I was going in a whole different world. It was new school. There was a new district. There's new people. There's new systems. And when I mean systems, I mean, from the little things like just an email system, grading system, just all those little systems you just take for granted that you knew already.
And you went from being a teacher to the boss too, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't going to vice principal, that step at that school. New culture, receptiveness of a new staff, whereas maybe if I was at ELC, at least I knew some people or most people, and whether that's good or bad, but at least you have a comfort level with people. Missing, you have new parents and then missing the student interaction, that was huge. Even though you have student interaction, it's just not the same on the other end. And then, just feeling, will I be as confident in this role as I was maybe in my other role? So those are some concerns. And one other thing is probably paperwork. I don't know if I'm a big fan of paperwork, but I knew that probably would have a little bit more paperwork. On the other end, some of the positives, I mean, I kind of was thinking about, it was a new challenge, something that might kind of reinvigorate me in a different way. Sharing my experiences that I had learned over the years. Maybe, I can help some other people and other teachers with their careers. Not that they needed it, but if there was an opportunity, then I had something to share. Practicing in my leadership skills and improving leadership skills. Sure. I think that was a challenging component that I thought I'd enjoy. And then trying to build a collaborative team as well. I think personally, part of it was I wanted to be closer, and this is a selfish reason, to my kids. So
that's a good reason, though. That makes sense, though.
Yeah, Leela, my wife, was at ELC too. So one of us wanted to be a little closer to get them to school and things like that. So, that played in the role as well. And then probably the funniest thing, Ruben and Jacob, was I was sitting at my first meeting when I left for my new job as a principal. And I was with what we call the leadership team. And I was sitting at a table. We were in groups, of course. And we were all talking. And at my table, I remember this so vividly, was the operations plant manager that was in charge of all the operations at all the school sites.
Oh, wow.
And he looked at me and goes, new guy on the block. All right. And he said, the only good thing about your job, the way he said it to me
Whoa.
was that you're going to make more money. That's the only good thing about your job.
Jeez.
But so in essence, that's what he said to me. But yeah, there is a salary increase, but I want to always let people know, sure, there's a salary increase, but remember, you're working more days than your contract. For instance, as teachers, we work 180 days.
Mm-hmm.
As an administrator or principal, you're working like 220, 210 days.
That's a lot.
So you're working more days to make that money.
Less time to spend that money.
Yeah.
You know, I actually could think of one plus besides a salary increase, the opportunity to mentor other teachers. Would you say that's true? I mean,
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's where I was trying to go with that shared experience, my experiences and supporting and helping others is, trying to mentor some new teachers as well to help them as well. So yeah, I definitely agree with that, Ruben. Yeah.
By the way, tell me what you think of this, because this topic has come up a couple of times. At our school, for the first time ever that I've seen in any school, but an administrator is teaching a class, one period. And I've heard from administrators, several, they've said, wow, I really miss the students. I miss teaching. Yeah. And so one admin has made the move. What are your thoughts about that? Something like that.
Yeah, and I agree, definitely agree with two things you just said. I definitely agree with missing the students. I totally miss the students. The second thing I think what that administrator is doing is a powerful move to earn complete respect of the staff too, because and because sometimes when you go into the administrative part of schools, you're not seen as a teacher anymore. Even though in my case, I felt like my strength was I wasn't like a one and done or a 5-year guy and out of the classroom. I spent 23 years as a teacher, showing that, there must have been something that I liked about teaching. I didn't just jump out of it. So in this person's case, for him jumping in the classroom, I think really shows, that he misses it or she misses it, but it also shows that he wants to stay connected. And I think it earns some respect from the staff too, that they're going and hopefully they're not doing it because they want to earn that respect, but I think it's a good thing that they're in there, and it does earn, I think, some kind of respect in the staff's eyes. Yeah.
Now, Paul, what would you say was your biggest surprise, though? Like, so people like like let's say someone like myself would, leave the classroom and go into administrative work. Let's say, well, what's one thing that surprised you the most? Like, oh wow, I didn't expect this, or I'm sure there are a lot of surprises, Paul, but can you think of what?
Yeah. Well, I think two things that jump out. First, Jacob Rubin, how overwhelming it was. I mean, it was overwhelming. I mean, my first year, second year, I mean, I almost, to tell you the truth, I had made that call to come back to ELC. I was ready to go, this is not in my.
Say it isn't so, Paul.
So I had made that call and I said, you know what, is there going to be an opening for science? Because I don't know if this is going to work out. I mean, after about a year or so, I said, I don't know. I don't know. This is not what I expected, but it was so overwhelming. And, and I think I told you just, the systems, the different culture, the different people, just everything was different. And so, but the biggest surprise, I think for me, right away is you learn that sometimes you're seen a little bit differently now. You're kind of gone from this teacher who you had all these colleagues and this camaraderie part, and you can talk at lunch together and do things, and now all of a sudden you're this you're on the dark side.
You're the them.
Yeah. The dark side, or you're the evaluator. You're on the other side now, and as much as you want to be a teacher still, not all, but some people don't. That's not who you are. You're the evaluator. You're on the other side. And so that was a little difficult to get used to. But you get used to it. You kind of stand by your core values and know what you're trying to do is, honest, consistent, and earn trust. But I think the biggest thing you had to do, and probably your other question, is just make sure you're building relationships. And I think building relationships is the key ingredient to it all. Even though all those relationships aren't going to be the, real close, but you're trying to build even the hardest or the toughest relationships that you can to keep that door open. But the biggest surprise, just how overwhelming, and then how differently you can be seen by others now that you were no longer called a teacher. So
I bet.
yeah.
Paul, there's a couple questions that I have left here. One of them is, regarding new teachers. You have a lot of new teachers coming into it right now, Paul. I'm not sure if you know this. I'm not sure if your wife has shared this, but maybe because they're adding new classes, because of, the assistant learning that happened. Now, what kind of advice would you give a new teacher right now who's thinking about going into the classroom? Maybe they haven't made that decision yet, but what would you share with them? Like, hey, this is something, that might benefit them.
So a new teacher coming into the profession.
Right.
Yeah, I think, the main thing about coming to the profession is just make sure that it's something that they really, really want to do, and doing it for the right reasons. I think that's the main thing. Sometimes people come into it just because, they can't, I always hear things that people are in these different areas and then they kind of fall back on teaching. And maybe we all do that to some degree sometimes, some of us. But I think you really got to think, is this what you really want to do? Because it's paramount that they understand that, they really hold the future of kids in their hands. I mean, and I always used to evaluate myself as, did I want my own child to be in my classroom today? So
wow,
if
good question.
my answer was yes, then I know I did probably a pretty good job. If it was no, then I know I need to get back on the horse and do a better job. So, it's not something you take lightly. And so they really have to think, is this what they want to do? Because they're going to be dealing with a lot of things. They're going to be dealing with parents if they make a bad decision, or even if they made a good decision, you're dealing with parents. You're dealing with kids that, aren't just going to do what you say. They just don't do what you say all the time. So they're going to have strategies to combat that. And then they're going to have to, figure out how to really teach. So it's not a job where they have to understand. They see, oh, I get the summers off. I get to come home at 2:00. Well, that's fine. You can come home right after school. But if you're going to be a successful teacher, there's some back end planning, behind the scene planning that's going on, because I mean, I could remember my first 5-10 years, especially. I mean, it's felt like my whole life just revolved around teaching, whether it was at the site or back at home planning. And
yeah, I remember you used to do a couple. You were always there. You're doing different things. I think you did some coaching too in your career, right? And you were pretty busy.
I did. But I mean, I did coach at Long Beach Wilson and there. But I mean, even as I got older, I might have left earlier, but you're still going home. You got smarter, of course, but you're still going home planning things out. And so people think, oh man, I'll be there at 8. I'm out at 2:10, and I'm home. I'm done. Well, that's fine, but you're not going to be a successful teacher. I'm doing that,
No, thanks for sharing that, because I think that's so true. I mean, and we've got this from other people who've been our guests, Paul, that you have to really love what you're doing, and the kids know it, don't they? They know if you're there clocking in, clocking out, and if you're giving your time and your passion, they'll grab onto that. Yeah. But Paul. I'm not sure if you know this, but I'm getting older. You can see the whiteness here. Like you don't age, but I don't know what kind of deal you made with the devil. But anyway, that being said, I'm going to be retiring soon, I think, in the next few years. Someone like me, and I know you've retired, what kind of advice would you give someone like me, Paul? I'm going to steal this advice. What kind of things should I be thinking about or planning for, or just even processing at this juncture of my career?
Yeah. And retiring is a big decision. So let me put it out there like that. Retiring is huge. And I would just say, well, congratulations that you're thinking about it. But
thank you.
I would just say, make sure you're ready, number one. So really think it out, having a plan. And, like what I'm seeing you guys do right now, Ruben and Jacob, what a great plan. I mean, this is like something that really, I mean, is in keeps you thinking, keeps you going, is interesting, is you're collaborating with people.
We always say it's our best PD, you know, this right here.
Exactly. So having a plan, you know, assessing your financial well-being, of course, you know, just making sure that you feel comfortable where you're at. You know, asking yourself, do you have any hobbies? Because in my case, I really don't have a lot of hobbies. So, you know, so I want to make sure that I was going to be okay, you know, in that retirement phase. And not that I've retired for good. I have some other things that I'm doing right now, still in the profession, but you know, setting your goals for retirement. Do you have any goals that you want to do in retirement? So make sure, you know, you think about, you know, if you like to travel, you want to go places, experience different things, you know, and just remember too, that some of the things that you might have done when you're younger, you won't do as an older person. Like, you know, to me, I think we all, when younger, I don't know about you, but I'm 22, I'm 23. I'm ready to retire right now, right? I'm tired. And I'm thinking all the things I would do at that age, but you know, at my age now, no, I'm not going to be doing that. I'm not going to be playing a basketball or, you know, these extra activities that I may do. The lifestyle has changed a little bit.
Sure.
You know, and be ready to step away from, you know, that camaraderie, the teachers, your friendships, your peers that you've established for so many years, and that was tough for me, just stepping away from that camaraderie. And then are you ready to step away too from the guidance, the support, the help, the mentoring, like Ruben said, the coaching that you give to those students every day? I mean, that's a huge piece, because, you know, those kids, they do, you know, we may not think that they appreciate us, but deep down there's an appreciation as they get older. Wow, that Mr. Aguilar's, you know, they were really people that cared about me and made a difference in my life.
Yeah.
So, you know, you got to just understand your personality as well, and know your personality type when you retire. For me, I still have to keep doing things. Leela's probably told you I have to always be busy. So, you know, I picked up something with National University, so I support students.
That doesn't surprise me, Paul. That's great, though.
But there's lots of things in the world to do, you know, and,
Sure.
and it gives you that flexibility. So, you know, you just kind of, if it works, if it's going to work for you and you're ready, man, it's great. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well,
those are some really good
yeah.
strategies for retirement. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Ruben's a little behind me, maybe. I don't know, maybe not. But this is definitely something to think about. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you sharing all that, Paul. I really do.
Yeah,
I know we both do. So thank you for being with us this evening. I've been wanting to have, when I first did this podcast, I think our first episode, I mentioned, not you by name, but I mentioned someone that I worked with, and I was actually talking about you. And I said, so since the first episode, I've been thinking about, we just love to have Paul on. And when you said yes, I was like, oh, great. And I do appreciate it. We just appreciate you coming on and giving us your really words of wisdom, and we appreciate that.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk with you guys. Number one, just great to connect with both of you, you know, and see both of you. It's been years, and I tell Leela all the time. I told her today as we went for a walk. I said, man, it's just the people that is who you miss at the school site. So yeah, so thank you. I think what you're doing, you guys are doing, is just a wonderful, component of this whole the whole teaching profession. So keep this up. Yeah, awesome.
Thank you,
Paul. Well, thank you, and have yourself a good night.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, you guys. Thank you.
Bye.